Wednesday, July the 15th. Lake level is about 923 and a half, and it's been coming down about 4 to 6 inches a day. That's probably about 6.5 feet above summer pool. So they continue the way they've been going. Probably in a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, the lake will be down to pool. Water temperature seems to start out about 82, 83 degrees in the morning. Then it warms up pretty good in the afternoon, mid to high 80s. If you're up in the shallow water, you'll see some low 90s. But, I think the fishing's been getting a little bit better. The fish are starting to set up on some of these points out there a little bit deeper. And with the water dropping like it is, a lot of the fish that were scattered way back in the bushes and the trees, some days we've been having pretty good days at the edge of the bushes. And that should continue to get better as they pull the water down. Now, I was getting some early bites on a buzzbait and a frog. I talked about that some last week, but that seemed like it kind of died off for me. I'm still catching a few short fish, but I'm not getting the quality fish on the buzzbait and whopper plopper or frog that I was. But, you want to keep a topwater bait handy. Have been catching some schooling fish. You don't know where they're going to come up or when. And one of the baits I like to throw best, if you've seen my fishing reports, it's the same bait I usually always get tied on, probably the same color. But I like to throw a Strike King Sexy Dog. It's a little bit bigger than a regular Zara spook and a little bit smaller than the Magnum one. But a lot of the reason I like it, I can cast it a long way. So if the fish come up a long ways away from the boat, I can make a long cast. It's probably one of the easiest walking baits. Another good bait is like a jointed redfin, whether it's a Storm Thunder stick or a Cotton Cordell redfin. And there's a lot of other companies, like Strike King's got a wake shad, but a bait that you can pretty much just cast out and reel back slow. And, this morning I caught quite a few on topwater. They, at first they were just coming up in singles, and then after a while they started coming up in big groups, but sometimes they get a little fussy to catch. They'll swat at the bait, but they really weren't eating it. So a lot of different things you can do. I tried a swim bait, didn't seem to work too much, but a lot of times you can pick up a spoon, a 1/2 ounce or 3/4 ounce. This is a slab spoon, but you can pick up either a flutter spoon or a slab spoon. I just happened to have a slab spoon tied on because I was fishing docks. Cast it out in the area where the fish have been surfacing, let it drop about 10 or 15 feet, and work it back to the boat, real aggressively. Now, I mentioned I had this tied on because, we've been getting bit, kind of a summertime pattern in the deep docks. Seems like the first 2 or 3 stalls on the deep side of the dock, you kind of want to get in there on the shaded side, and usually some of the best docks, they got anywhere from 40 to 70 foot of water underneath the ends of them. And the fish are usually suspended. A lot of times with my live scope, Garmin live scope, I can see how far down, they're suspended. What I'll do, I'll pitch back in there, let it free spool about 10 to 12 seconds, then work it back out of the stall pretty aggressively. Normally, if you get one bite and you get them fired up, there's usually a group and you can catch several. Now, I hadn't got that bite going real good. It's certain docks it's working, but I've got to cover, quite a few docks. But, I mentioned we caught some fish out of the... I haven't been doing much drop shotting, so I'm not going to get too much into that. I hadn't been down lake, but I know some of the guys are down there catching them out of the deep trees, anywhere from 25 to 35 feet deep. Usually in the summertime, if I can avoid that lower end down there by the dam, I'm going to stay out of that area because much after 10 o'clock, the boat traffic is so thick. And personally, I'd just soon be fishing in a little bit shallower water up in the river arms. And I think it was Monday, we were up in the Indian Creeks, which is, back behind Baxter. And what kind of surprised us, or surprised me, is I think we had 7 keepers flipping, and they were all smallmouths, where a lot of the places I thought they should be largemouth. But I think there's been a lot of them, normally much after June, the smallmouth get pretty hard to catch when the water gets real hot. But, this year's been a little different because we've had current all year. Water's been staying right around the mid-80s. And normally when they're moving a lot of that current like that, the thermocline doesn't set up real deep. And I think a lot of them smallmouths have been back in the bushes as well with the largemouth. But what seemed to be working real good for us in there was a 7/16 ounce 5-fish ultimate finesse jig and a Missouri craw. And we're using a Strike King baby rage craw for a trailer. And a lot of these fish weren't buried in the bushes real tight. They were kind of right at the edge of the break line where it's a little bit easier to fish. Another one I've been throwing in there, if I'm flipping in the heart of the bush, I usually like the cover jig because it'll come through some of that brush a little bit better. I've also been Texas rigging like a Strike King game hog or baby brush hog with a 1/4 ounce or 5/16 bullet weight as well. But it seemed like we kind of started to pattern them fish. We could go down a long stretch of bank and not hard to get a bite. But if you could find a little pocket or a little cut that had a point, that's normally where most of the bites came from. And usually when you got one bite, you got, you know, several bites. But most of the time the boat was setting in 12 to 14 foot of water and pitching the edge of the bushes, which was about 8 to 10 feet. But, you know, every day that changes. That'll be another 6 inches shallower tomorrow. But a lot of the fish are out, you know, setting up on, like I was up by Campbell Point, Shell Knob. You can catch them out there on a Carolina rig, football jig. Like I say, they're starting to set up on the structure a little bit. It depends where you're at on the lake. In the mornings, they'll be, you know, 15 to 18 foot deep on the bottom. Once the sun gets up, depends where you're at, but they'll get anywhere from, you know, 20 to 30 to almost 35 feet deep out there. And it depends, you know, what type of bank I've got and what type of, you know, how big a bait I want to use. But, you know, a football jig will work good. I've been throwing like a 5/8 ounce. This is a pig sticker. I like the little pig sticker football jig. It's got a little bit smaller hook, so when you're fishing a lot deeper like that, it's a little bit easier to penetrate that hook, you know, into the fish. And I usually use, you know, a pretty small craw on it. Now, another thing I've been throwing out there is a wobble head and also a new, this is a shaky head 5-fish lures that we've been working on for quite a while. We finally got them out. But this thing has got a 6/0 hook in it. It's got a big meat hook in it. It's not a shaky head you want to be throwing on spinning gear with 6 or 8 pound line. It's set up for big baits, you know, and heavy line. Now, we are going to come out with a finesse style one with a thinner wire hook, but this one actually came out just about the right time. I fished prototypes of it all last year. Really had a lot of success with it. It's kind of got a pyramid-shaped head, a lot like Ned Rig does, where it comes through the brush and the cover real well. A lot of times if I'm fishing brush piles or rough rock out there where the football jig gets hung up quite a bit, I'll pick up this ultimate shaky head. Now, when you're dragging it across the bottom, depending on what kind of bait you got, you know, it will stand up sometimes. And where it comes into a pyramid like that, it just really comes through the brush and the limbs real well. Now, there's such a variety of baits that you can fish on it. Right here, I've got a Zoom Magnum trick worm on it. A lot of times, and you know, when the water gets real warm, especially if I'm in stained water, I like to upsize my baits. You know, this is when we start throwing 9, 10-inch worms. And this is a Zoom O Monster, 10-inch worm. You fish it on it, fish the same thing on it. If you want to fish like just a craw, this is a Strike King Rage Craw. And one of the unique things on this shaky head that, you know, I really wanted was on the screw lock, I wanted a center pin to make it easy to screw the bait on. I mean, I hate a lot of them shaky heads that don't have that, especially if the worms are slimy. They're just real hard to get started on. So that was a little deal that, you know, I wanted on there. But, you know, you can fish a big craw on it. And the local tackle stores just got them. I mean, I delivered a bunch of them today. Sportsman Factory Outlet in Springfield's got them in stock. Extreme Outdoors, Kimberling City has them. The Harder House in Berryville or Shell Knob has them. And the Harder House in Kimberling City should have them in a week or so. But this is a 1/2 ounce. This is the only one that we've got done right now. But we are coming out with a 5/8 and a 3/4. The molds are being made for them right now. But it's we've really caught some good fish. on either a Carolina rig, football jig, wobble head, and a lot of it's just kind of preference of what type of bait that you want to fish. Normally, this time of year, you know, I'll have a lot of rods on the deck. When I go out there to fish that offshore stuff, I'm going to have a bottom bait, which is going to be the jig, stand-up shaky head or wobble head. I'm going to have a crankbait. You know, like all the DT series will work from Rapala, you know, DT16 or DT20. My favorite's a Strike King this time of year, 6XD. Depending on the watercolor, if it's got some stain, I'll throw this one here. I think this is a green gizzard if the water's clear. Now, you don't have to be in the river arms to fish these baits. I mean, they'll bite it around Kimberling, Indian Point area, around Joe Bald. But I just find that after 9, 10 o'clock, the boat traffic is just so bad, it's hard to stay out there on them points. And also with the bite, there seems to be a pretty good bite, you know, till about 8 o'clock, then it slows up. But I've been out on some full day trips, and there's actually, the bite's been picking up about, you know, 10:30, 11 o'clock, and there's a good afternoon bite as well. And, you know, that bite's been better for me later in the day out deeper. But anyways, I'll have, you know, football jigs, shaky head, crankbaits, and a swim bait. And a lot of times, you know, I just have to look at the fish on the fish finder, on the live scope to see what the bait and the fish are doing, and that determines what bait I'm going to throw. A lot of the swim baits, you know, like I'm really upsizing on my swim bait. This is a 5-inch swim bait, and I'll usually throw it on a 1/2 ounce or 3/4 ounce head. This way, if I want to fish it down in the bottom and hop it off the bottom, you know, I can do that real good with the 3/4 ounce. It's a good search bait. I can keep it in 8 or 10 foot of water, you know, swim it, keep it in that depth range. Another swim bait I like to throw is a scrounger head, whether it's this one is a Pulse. It's a 5/8 ounce, and that's actually Pulse's his own plastic swim bait that they got on there. It comes in a kit with a couple different swim baits and the 5/8 scrounger head. Lucky Strike also makes a real good scrounger head. But a lot of times if you get them fish fired up, and you can tell when you get them fired up, you'll see them moving on the graph. You might get 2, 3, 4 bites, and then it just stops. And whatever you've been throwing, then I'll pick up a little bit different bait, whether it be the crank. If I'm throwing a crankbait, then I might go down to the bottom, throw the big worm or the jig or the shaky head down there. And a lot of it, like I say, it depends what I see the fish doing on the electronics. If it looks like they've come up in the water column, if I was fishing a jig, then I'll pick up the swim bait or the crankbait. A lot of it's just trial and error. And, you know, I think it's going to get better because I've been struggling to catch those fish out there offshore. You know, I felt like they should have been out there 2, 3 weeks ago. But everything's a little bit, you know, behind. And now with the water coming down lower, I think it's pulling a lot of the fish off the shoreline, getting them out onto the structure. And a lot of the main reason they're out there is because the bait's out there too. So, you know, you just got to kind of mix it up. And, you know, I believe the flipping bite is still going to be extremely good. I think when that water gets down another 3 feet, the guy's not going to have to be able to spend so much time back in there. There's not going to be as much cover as there was. So it's going to be a little bit easier to try to pattern the fish. So, till next week, good luck, good fishing.